Good morning, everyone. This is the Vermont House Committee on Commerce and Economic Development. It is Thursday, February 2026 at 9:07 in the morning. And so we're beginning our day today with H650, Act relating to educational technology products. Sagal is our legislative counsel who is going to walk us through the draft. Good morning, Rick. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. How's everyone?
It's wonderful.
Much better.
Thank you.
So as the chair said, H650, you should have, and I'll pull up on the screen, draft 2.1 of a proposed committee amendment. Just to get a bit of a refresher, this is the bill that would regulate educational technology products in the state. This draft has a fairly significant change from the bill that was introduced. The bill that was introduced would have required certification in the statute itself. It had language about can't remember if it was AOE or Secretary of State actually going through that certification process. That has now been moved to a study, as you'll see here in a second. But I do want to go over the language that has changed since the last draft. Okay, so on page one, only one addition, adding the phrase "in Vermont," just to clarify that the products we are looking to regulate must be used in a school in Vermont, if that wasn't clear. Page two, an update to the definition of a provider of an educational technology product.
So, because we have money that goes outside of our state, right? For some schools, there's like very few schools.
It's time limited, I think, because it's people who are currently in school, but no more students can go after this current school year. So it holds,
Because of Act 7.
yeah, because of Act 7. So it's pretty limited,
Okay,
or it's way more limited than it ever has been.
just wanted to make sure Vermont kids are safe.
That's part of the problem when we send
Yeah.
money across borders is we can't
Control that.
ensure anything about their education.
Okay, subdivision two, the definition of provider of an educational technology product. A new sentence was added, and you'll see why in a little bit. You'll see that the main definition stays the same. Second sentence, a provider shall utilize geolocation and IP address tracking technologies to determine whether one of its contract-free products is being used in the school. And I'll kind of get back to that here in a second as to why that's some type of language would be recommended for that.
Seems odd to put that in the definition.
There might be a better place. We can talk about that. But let me say the reason that's there is because providers oftentimes have free products that schools use, and the provider may not even know that one of their products is being used by, one teacher in the school. So, but that provider would still need to register with the state, even if it's a free product. So that language is meant to require those providers, the technology's out there to see where your products are being used, and they should utilize those technologies to determine if one of its free products is being used in a school in Vermont that they don't have a contract with. And yeah, maybe that language can be moved. I thought that it made sense there, but happy to talk about other places. Okay, the registration piece. This was updated to reflect the data broker H211 definition that you all have kind of moved towards. The introduced version had that 30 days after it becomes a provider of ed tech. This is now same thing, 30 days of becoming a ed tech provider, but then also once annually on or before July 1st. So that matches the H211 language there. Again, it's open if you want to change it. That's completely up to you all. The fee was 100. But you also, that was based on the data broker language. It was increased to 500. I think 211 has it at 900. So again, that's open to committee debate, what that number should be. Add in the phrase "a link" on line 17 to their privacy policy in case they don't have a PDF to upload it. They can just link it. It should be on their website. So a link to the privacy policy. C is new or restructured language. And this, again, this is during the registration process. They must provide this information, the name of each school or school district in which the provider is operating into a contract. D, the name and brief description of each product operated by the provider. And E, which products are known by the provider to be in use in any school or school district. So this is where the language, the geolocation tracking language is important. So maybe you could put it here. Again, that's the purpose, is so they can complete the E subdivision.
Just a quick question. If
John.
pursuant to a contract, is there a contract if the only products are, if the free versions of the products being used?
To me, no. They may have agreed to terms of use, but to me, that's not a contract. Yeah, I think that's fairly straightforward.
Yep.
The two parties haven't really met and discussed terms. They just agreed to the terms.
You, in the registration criteria, it says the name of each school or school district in which provider is operating pursuant to a contract. Well, what if they haven't yet and they're looking to maybe begin to, maybe I've got an educational product and I haven't sold it to anyone yet, and I want to go and solicit to the schools. I wouldn't know that.
So you could put none, or if
Okay.
you want to say if any, that language can be put in there. But I think the Secretary of State would have a category that says none or NA.
Okay.
That's my belief.
Does or would this apply to homeschoolers?
The definition of school, I don't believe includes in the 16 VSA 166. I don't believe, but Beth St. James might be, who's coming in later. You may want to ask her about that definition. Yeah. Okay. So then we go to subdivision 4 on line 5, page 3. They must also attest that each product being used in a school meets the standards set forth in the Vermont Age Appropriate Design Code Act. And I don't have it pulled up, but if you want, you can see there's several requirements that, in that case, entities must meet as far as design practices, data privacy practices. So that is going to be law January 1, 2027. So, there would be a little bit of a gap in time as to if this was effective July 1, 2026. So we can talk about that, but there was discussion about having that be just clear that you also need to meet these standards that this Vermont's already passed into law. As well as the any other state and federal privacy laws, if Vermont ever passes some kind of data privacy act, or if the federal government ever passes some kind of additional child privacy protections, they must also attest that they are meeting those standards as well. So penalties, just that intro language updated, a person that fails to register, that fails to provide all required information, or that provides incorrect information during registration. The penalties stay the same so far. Let's skip to the next page. Adding the word enforcement, but the actual language in that paragraph didn't change. So section 2 is brand new. This was previously the statute that would require certification, and how that looked, how that worked. That's been converted to a study that the AOE will work with the Secretary of State on. So the task is to consult with the Secretary of State, AOE, and they shall review all of the registrations pursuant to this registry. So if this is effective July 1, 2026, you would start having some data come in. AOE would look at the registrants and they would say, okay, we have however many are registering, to see how many have actually registered. To create this list of products in use across schools after consulting with schools, and then cross-referencing the list of registrants with the list of products being used to determine the names of any unregistered educational tech providers operating in the state, and then forward those names to the Office of the Attorney General, who has enforcement in this law. 4, provide a recommendation as to how the state should certify ed tech products for use in schools. So again, previously this was just they would develop this on their own with state legislative kind of guidance. At this point now, they would be in the study report recommending how this is to be done. A, which state entities should be involved in the certification process and to what extent? The criteria to be considered in the certification process, which the minimum shall include. This comes straight word for word from the previous bill was introduced. These are things that the bill had in it as far as this is what the certification should be. So I'll read them, but they were in the introduced bill. The product's compliance with state curriculum standards, advantages of using the product compared with non-digital methods, whether the product was explicitly designed for educational use, design features of the product, including geolocation tracking, use of AI, targeted advertising, personalized recommendation systems, access to adults unknown to a student, and features that would lead to compulsive use, as well as the data privacy practices of the provider of the product. The timeline needed to establish and implement the certification process, and whether any third-party services, including Internet Safety Lab, should be utilized to assist in the certification. And finally, in the study, provide the General Assembly with any other information it deems relevant to help ensure that educational technology products are safely and smartly used in Vermont schools. The report will be due on or before November 15th, 2027 to this committee and the Senate Economic Development Committee. Maybe you want to add the education committees if you want to do this. With its findings and information gathered pursuant to subsection A, along with any recommendations for legislative action concerning the certification of educational technology products. Okay. Any questions?
I would just wanna, to Kirk's point, I really think we need to have carve out for homeschool. I don't think a parent that's being homeschooled should have to go through all this, nor do I think that they should have to register the curriculum. And the reason I say that is there are curriculums out there where there's only 5 people in the entire state that use it. And, you know, it's bad enough paying for these curriculums, so $500-600, and then to add a $500 charge on top of it.
I don't think it covers homeschool.
Okay, I just want to make sure it's clear that if you're selling educational curriculum to homeschool parents, that they should be exempt. That should be be carved out.
We'll.
So they confirm, but yeah, understood.
Yeah.
That's-
So following up on that, you know, we have our flexible pathways and specifically Vermont Learning Cooperative. It's the flexible pathway that allows for online learning. That would not affect this. This would not affect that either, correct?
So this is designed
For
for
in school.
education technology that is used in a classroom to ensure that any tech product follows appropriate rules and is actually designed to educate students and provides that educational support.
Right,
So
I'm
so the learning, Vermont Learning,
cooperative, we know what it's
you know, yeah, anyway, they,
LCT, whatever,
They-
virtual learning cooperative.
there you go. Is like it's online school. And if they use it, then they would have to probably ensure that any product that they use is registered if they're using ed tech as part of their online classroom. It's an online classroom.
It's an online classroom, but that would not affect like using the computer for the online portion. Yeah, So it's-
This is software. This is education technology software.
okay, I just want to make sure that is not affected, because that definitely would be a concern. Thank you for bringing that up. And, you know, whether or not we write in specific, but I don't know if we need to write it in, but.
Yeah, if
it
they
would-
use a platform, it could impact it. That would be the only thing, depending on what kind of, what if it's, yeah.
So we may want to bring them in to find out if they do use a platform, just because they're our preferred vendor, for a lack of a
So
word.
this isn't stopping a vendor from registering with the state, right? This is just telling anybody who is a education technology software or platform that there are minimum standards for you to show us or to attest to that you follow in order to be used in Vermont. Yeah, we can bring them in, absolutely. But
Yeah,
this is-
I just want to make sure that we're not affecting, I mean, if, I didn't see where it would. Because when I'm looking at this, I'm thinking of public schools, like brick and mortar public schools. But if there's any potential of affecting those virtual schools, then we probably should write in there an exception on that, just in case.
So that they shouldn't have to follow the minimum safety standards and
Well,
make
they're
sure
not-
that their products
they're
are
not-
actually safe for kids. That's what, I mean,
That
that's.
was not the best way to say that to me.
But that's, I'm trying to speak
no,
your
no,
language, right?
Well,
Yeah, why would they be accepted?
well, I don't know much about homeschooling, so except for I actually am a big proponent of it. So I think it's very good. I just want to make sure that, we're not having that, we're not affecting them because it's actually working when it comes to education. And we could disagree on that, but
No, the learning, if you're talking about the learning, on virtual learning, it's a certified school with the state.
Correct. I mean, if
So
we're,
that would be covered here.
right, but I mean, as he said, a homeschool who uses like a Becca Books, which is down in, Florida, right? They have a homeschooling curriculum. I don't think that they use education technology. They've,
So I don't think homeschool is going to be included. So we're talking about schools,
Yeah.
which are defined 16 VSA once. You know what? Let's just let's take a look here. So again, Beth St. James knows this better than I, but we can look at the definition of what we use here, the cross reference to 166. So we're talking if this is approved independent schools, which must be seemingly approved by the state board.
which virtual learning wouldn't be an independent school. Right?
Are you talking about virtual learning or are you talking about homeschooling? Because
A little bit of
they're two
both.
different things. We'll pick one.
Yeah, they're-
Let's
they
talk
are-
about
We'll do homeschooling first. I don't think that, and I might be wrong, but I'm not sure there's much like structure around homeschooling. To my knowledge, it's
So there is some. I mean,
right. There's some, but I don't know if there's a lot.
And it's
Well,
kind of as much as.
there's not, and that's by design, because the
Right.
point is that if a parent wants to educate their child, what we have to do is we have to send a letter to the Secretary of Education or someone over there that says we're gonna homeschool. And then there's a certain criteria that we need to meet, like what I remember with my kids is drug education. And we basically give them an outline of what we're gonna teach, and then they either approve it or they don't. And if they don't, they tell you why it's not approved. You also need to make sure you have a letter from a doctor saying your child doesn't have any issues that may prevent them, they need some extra help. And when the year's over, either A, can have a licensed teacher sign off on the work, or you can send it to the Secretary of Education and they'll sign off on it.
Okay.
But it seems like within this structure, this is about the companies that are offering the technology.
Right.
So in the case of a virtual school, unless they have a proprietary platform, it's gonna be the vendors that they use that would need to
And
register.
I suspect that Vermont Virtual Learning does have their own platform, but it's designed specifically for education and AOE has approved it. So I don't know why I'm getting all fussy about it. And then if it doesn't apply to homeschool, doesn't apply to home study, that's not an issue. So I'm just like running my mouth for no reason.
I think if there are software developers in Vermont that are working in ed tech, they would have to follow this
Right.
registry, but.
But they wouldn't have a problem with that, I'm sure, because they've already go through whatever hoops they have to do just to get to the point where their path works. So our schools are not overly cooperative for that. It's a whole different story. There is a bill on that. I'm done. I worked through it, I'm sorry.
Good.
Oh, no worries.
Any more questions for Rick?
Thank you, Rick.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No. For the roles.
Lisa, good morning.
Oh, we're not hearing you.
Sorry.
There you go.
Good morning. Hi, everyone. 1 second here. Thank you, Chair Marcotte and Vice Chair Greening and committee members. I'm happy to be here again. Thank you for the opportunity to provide comments on the amended H650 and also answer any questions from the committee. I think, as you know, I'm Lisa Lavasser, founder and research director of Internet Safety Labs. We're a nonprofit, nonpartisan, independent digital product safety testing organization. As far as I know, the first and only one of its kind that has this kind of scope. I only have a few comments on the revised bill. And for those of you who know me, the first one will come as no surprise. That definition, the added language in the definition of provider of an educational technology product that we just saw with the the obligation to track geolocation of users. Later in the bill, in that section for the report that the Agency of Education is going to produce, it actually calls out geolocation tracking as a risk. So on one hand, you're mandating it as a measure to identify the off-the-shelf technologies that are being used in the state. And on the other hand, you're flagging it rightfully as a risk to students. So geolocation, which is really the conversion of the IP address to a course location, we also flag that as a risk. So I do understand the need for the state and the manufacturers to really know if their contract-free products are being used by students in Vermont, but I would encourage the state to maybe explore other options to try to manage that without mandating location surveillance. That would be my comment there. Some considerations for the report in section 2. One is a little bit of a reinforcement from my earlier comments. The use of artificial intelligence really needs a much more precise breakdown, and I imagine that will be an undertaking of the report itself. But I just really want to emphasize that artificial intelligence is a buzzword, it's a marketing phrase. You really need to break it down to concrete software behaviors that you're interested in that can be measured. That's the important thing. So just wanted to underscore the need for that. And then there's an item called targeted advertising. And I didn't say this before, and I should have. We regularly find traffic to advertising platforms, data brokers, identity resolution platforms, customer data platforms, all of that, a lot of it that does not correlate to the appearance of an actual advertisement in the app. This is really quite an important thing to be aware of. So when they get to this item, then you might really want to go more deep than just the appearance of advertising, because there is a lot of communication and a lot of information, student information, being passed to advertising and marketing platforms that isn't mapped to the appearance of an advertisement. And I'll just underscore it. I think you all know this, but we are available, and all of our online resources are available to the Agency of Education as resources to ensure that whatever comes out of that certification from a safety perspective, again, we are not at all weighing in on educational effectiveness or efficacy. We have nothing to add to that. But in terms of overall digital product safety for children and adults, but also children, we have, several years experience and an enormous amount body of work to offer to have more precision that will result in something that is measurable and enforceable. Some other general comments that I will say, the question of the terms of service, the terms of service is a contract. It is not with the state or the district, of course, but for the off-the-shelf technologies, that contract is between the user and the manufacturer. And I'm certain that manufacturers will tell you that it is a binding contract, even though it is contract of adhesion, frankly. But they will tell you it is a contract. So, but it is between the user and the manufacturer. So it's completely outside of the state. Like the state really and the district and the school has nothing to do with that. It's the individual saying, yep, I want to create an account and I abide by your terms of service. So that's just a clarification on that.
Sorry,
also-
Lisa, where was that? Can you?
So this is just in general, like terms
Okay.
of service in general for off-the-shelf technologies, then the what do you call it? The contract free products. There are terms of service, those are contracts, and they are between the individual user and the manufacturer. They are understood to be contracts.
Yes, yes.
They need to be tested, frankly, in a court of law, because I think that there are several criteria of contract law. I am not a lawyer, but I've spent a lot of time in this space. I think there are several criteria about being informed that are impossible to meet. So, but they have not been tested in the way that I think they should be tested. So just a point of clarification on the nature of those contracts. The other thing I want to just underscore is attestation by the manufacturer has been historically ineffective. And that's why these certifications that you have, the different, and I understand them broadly in two different categories of certification. I think they're really important. And sorry, it's early here. You're the first time I'm using my voice this morning. I also wanted to mention that Utah State Board of Education has quite a lot of experience in actually sense making of the ed tech in their states and putting some general guidelines around the districts and the obligations of what the schools need to do. So if I can facilitate anything there, if your agency of education would like to have an introduction, or you may be already connected, but they really have done some good work there. And they also have an ed tech bill, a similar ed tech bill currently in under review in their state legislation. And it also has the two types of certification: educational effectiveness and overall technology safety. And it's really important to have both of those as you do and you're contemplating in yours, because they're totally different disciplines. They're different expertise. And like I keep underscoring, we have no expertise in educational effectiveness. That is not, we are software experts, and we have enormous expertise in the safety side. But so I also understand that California and Texas are also working on similar bills. So I just raise that to you as information. And that's really all I have to say today, unless there are questions.
Any questions for Lisa?
So Lisa, I just have one question on the free applications and software. 100% agree. I know that the geolocation is being used. I know that the IP addresses can be seen. Is there a better way to loop them in to make sure that, you know, we have them covered under the same law? And I can look at what Utah has done. I haven't checked
Yeah,
that
I
yet.
don't know that Utah has solved this particular issue. I haven't fully absorbed their revised bill. The last bill I saw actually didn't address the off-the-shelf stuff. So I knew you were going to ask me this, and I don't have a great answer.
That's fine. Just knowing there isn't a great answer is an answer.
Yeah, I mean, like one thing I think about is like proactively auditing the technology and assessing, you know, some level of compliance with the certification criteria. I mean, the off-the-shelf stuff likely is not. It's educational light in a way, like a lot of times it's educational games, it's that sort of thing. So maybe they even need different criteria for the educational effectiveness. I don't know, I'm spitballing here. I really, this needs greater, deeper thinking. But I do think like possibly just proactively understanding who's complying and making that, instead of having to do the surveillance, you know, like rather just ensuring and certifying technologies as viable for the state. And I don't know, something like that maybe would be better.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions for Lisa? Great, Lisa, thank you. Travis?
Yes, hello.
Good morning.
How are you?
Good.
All right. Notes here. All right. Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair Greening, and members of the committee. My name is Travis Gilley. I'm the Executive Director of the Real Safety AI Foundation, an AI safety ethics and literacy nonprofit. I use assistive technology every day to communicate and process information. For me, it's not optional. In the same relationship a wheelchair user has with the wheelchair. I homeschooled my son for 5 years. He's currently in a special education program. I navigated the education system as a disabled student myself. I navigated it again as a parent of one. I'm not here representing any company. No one's paying me to be here. I just saw a gap in the testimonies that I couldn't stay quiet about. I want to acknowledge that draft 2.1 addresses some significant concerns with the introduced version. Moving from immediate certification to a study with a reporting deadline is a meaningful structural improvement, but the study criteria in Section 2 will shape whatever certification system Vermont eventually builds. And several of those criteria, if carried forward unchanged, will create serious problems for students with disabilities. I'd like to walk you through what I see in the study criteria, not in the registration system, but I think is a reasonable step, but in the criteria that will define certification down the road. The study criteria include evaluating advantages of using the product compared with non-digital methods. For a neurotypical student, maybe a physical textbook works just as well as a digital one. For a child with cerebral palsy, there's no non-digital equivalent. For a non-verbal child, there's no non-digital AAC device. For a student with dyslexia, there's no non-digital text-to-speech. If this criterion carries forward into certification, it structurally disadvantages assistive technology because it frames digital tools as optional alternatives rather than necessities with no analog equivalent. The study criteria flags features that would lead to compulsive use as a design feature concern. I understand why that language is here, but for an ADHD student, gamification is a dopamine delivery mechanism. ADHD is at its core, at its neurological core, a dopamine regulation disorder. Gamification increases dopamine and serotonin release. It does that for what attention? It does for attention what a ramp does for a wheelchair. The FDA has authorized a video game as prescription treatment for ADHD. Endeavor RX cleared in 2020. Endeavor OTC cleared in 2024. Published in the Lancet Digital Health. The line between compulsive use and effective engagement for a neurodivergent student is not obvious. And if the study doesn't account for that distinction, the certification it recommends won't either. The criteria also flag personalized recommendation systems. That is how adaptive learning works. The software adjusts content based on how the student interacts with it. For a student with an IEP, personalized recommendations aren't a design concern. They are the accommodation. If the study treats personalization as inherently suspect, it will produce certification criteria that conflict with how IEP mandated tools function. Similarly, the criteria flag the use of artificial intelligence. AI is not a risk category, it is a tool category. AI powers text-to-speech, speech-to-text, adaptive learning platforms, and communication devices for nonverbal students. Flagging AI overall as a design concern without distinguishing between exploitative uses and assistive uses will produce recommendations that sweep assistive technologies into the same bucket as targeted advertising. I'd also like this committee to consider the $500 registration fee. For large edtech companies, that's nothing. For a small company that builds specialized AAC apps used by a few hundred nonverbal students nationwide, $500 per state adds up fast. Small assistive technology providers operate on thin margins because their market is small by definition. That flat fee is invisible to Google, but it's a barrier to the company that builds tools for nonverbal childs. This committee has heard testimony citing that well over 95% of ed tech products have no evidence base. That statistic is measuring the wrong thing. It measures whether individual products have run their own clinical trials. Most haven't, that's true, but the methodologies those products implement have been studied exhaustively. Computer-supported collaborative learning, meta-analysis that had 425 studies, over 11,000 participants, effect sizes ranging from 42 to 89. Gamification in K-12, effect size of 78, nearly double that of most pharmaceutical interventions. Universal Design for Learning, or UDL, 20 studies showing benefits for all learners, not just disabled students. The evidence exists, it just doesn't live at the product level, it lives at the methodology level. The National Disability Rights Network's managing attorney has said that these bans stop an IEP team from considering a full range of options. I'm not asking you to kill the bill. The registration systems are a reasonable first step. I'm asking you to ensure that the study criteria account for assistive technology and disability from the beginning, not as an afterthought. Specifically, I'd ask that the study be required to consult with disability rights organizations and special education experts, that the non-digital comparison criterion include exception for tools that have no non-digital equivalent, that compulsive use be defined in a way that distinguishes between exploitative engagement and therapeutic engagement for neurodivergent students, and that personalized recommendation systems and AI be evaluated based on their function, not flagged as inherently risky. This committee has heard from no disability rights organizations as of the last meeting on February.
Oh,
Oh, so I'm back. Okay. All right. As of February 6th, there were no education experts, no students. The study is where the real decisions will be made. If disability isn't at the table for the study, it won't be in the recommendations. And if it's not in the recommendations, the certification system Vermont builds will have the same problems that I'm describing today. Every issue I've raised has a specific fix. I'd like to submit them in writing to the committee. If I'm asking you just not to build a certification system that puts the next student like me in a queue with no accommodations. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Travis, thank you. That was incredibly helpful. And I took a lot of notes from your testimony. I appreciate that perspective and yeah, looking at how we bring it in, I completely agree that assistive technology should not be limited in this through this. It should, as long as it's assistive, as long as it's providing the appropriate supports, as long as it's not exploiting student information, all of that, it makes perfect sense. So thank you.
Yeah. Appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
Jonathan?
Hi, Travis, something that you said that caught my attention was, I believe, if I can paraphrase it correctly, that the line between, that in gamification, there's a line between something that is enhancing learning and something that becomes compulsive use, and that line is murky. Do I have that right? If so, where is that research today, and who is undertaking that?
So currently, one of the meta-analysis that I mentioned, and I have given you all the references ahead of time, mentions that gamification helps both neurotypical students and neurodivergent students, like overall. But you're right about the distinction being something that doesn't exactly have a good definition between something that's addictive and something that is actually helping. That would need to be, I guess, studied further. But as of right now, I don't think there's really a distinction. Although I personally have thoughts about the problematic usage of the term addiction. I just think that it leads to a legal loophole that people might not be considering as far as ADA accommodations.
Thank you.
Questions for Travis? Hey, Travis, if you would send us your written testimony, that would be great too.
Yes, I'll do that as soon as that is complete.
Perfect, thank you. Andrew?
Hi, good morning. My
Good
name is
morning.
Andrew. How are y'all? Thank you for inviting me today. And apologies I couldn't make the first session. I have some prepared remarks, and then I'm happy to answer any questions at the end. Thanks again for having me today. I'm Andrew Liddell of the EdTech Law Center. We're a consumer protection law firm in Austin, Texas, that was founded by my wife Julie and I to solve problems where school meets technology and to help protect kids' privacy rights and safety at school on their school devices. I'm not being paid to be here today. H650 is an important step in ensuring transparency and accountability for the education technology that has taken over the K-12 classroom. Over the past 15 years and counting, the EdTech industry has preyed on the public's inherent trust in schools and educators' well-founded concerns about preparing students for the future to cynically pump schools full of technology that does not keep students safe, does not help them learn, and flagrantly violates their privacy rights. Compared to the robust vetting process that supports curriculum adoption, where subject matter experts and everyday citizens alike have a chance to weigh in, and which is conducted in full view of the public, EdTech adoption has been ad hoc, cloaked in secrecy, and driven by the big tech's desire to hook students young and create customers for life. As a result, students' privacy rights are being invisibly invaded daily by the products they're forced to use to receive the education that they're legally entitled to. Flagrantly distorting federal laws that are meant to protect children's privacy rights online and student records while in school, the EdTech industry asserts that under COPPA, companies are schools, and that under FERPA, schools are parents, so that no consent or disclosure is required to begin pervasively data mining children as early as kindergarten. And I'd be happy to discuss these distortions further if you'd like. As bad or worse, students are experiencing acute harms through their school-mandated computers. Most common is pervasive distraction, which is an obvious result when Google, a company that makes money by observing users' web activity, is given free rein to shape the classroom environment with laptops that serve its bottom line. So when a kid spends all day watching YouTube instead of paying attention in math class, he's not misusing his Chromebook, he's using it as Google designed it. At the other end of the spectrum are the harms that follow when young children are served violent or pornographic content in response to innocent search queries, or when adult strangers contact children through school devices that their parents assume are safe, or may not even know connect to the internet at all. And these are clients of mine. I'm happy to tell you about those cases in more detail if you'd like. Internal Google documents recently unsealed in the social media lawsuits, so not in litigation I've been involved with, and publicly available, show that Google has, for many years, viewed schools as a way to grow its base of young users of Google products and young viewers of YouTube. Google executives have known for just as long that the administrative tools that well-intentioned school IT personnel use to try and keep kids safe online and on task are trivially easy for students to bypass. They just thought it wasn't worth the effort to improve them. I have some of these documents open here in front of me, and I'm happy to share them at the end of my prepared remarks. It would be one thing if EdTech were like steroids and these serious side effects accompanied remarkable gains in academic performance, so that there was a serious cost-benefit discussion to be had. But student outcomes in math, science, and reading have fallen every year since 2012, when one-to-one programs began being implemented in earnest, erasing 50 years of progress in public education in the United States. Somewhat, darkly ironically, kids are even less computer literate now than they were in 2018, despite spending a lot more of their lives and time in front of a computer. Digital learning platforms that may show positive results in lab settings, in industry-funded studies, they consistently fail to deliver when used in real school by real kids. And that's not to say it's impossible to educate children using digital devices, only that it hasn't seriously been tried. H650 is an important first step in ensuring that any device or program that comes into the classroom is shown to be safe, legal, and effective before it's ever used by a student. These are sensible requirements that parallel the safety and efficacy standards of everything else in the school environment. And to my mind, it's long past time for big tech to play by the same rules as the companies that make textbooks, desks, paint on the walls, the insulation within them, and the playground equipment that all these companies must obey. A final comment, specifically about the amended bill under section 2444B, subsection C, about enforcement. Leaving the enforcement to the Attorney General only. I would encourage the committee to provide some type of private right of action, whether it's even a backstop, where think about a complaint is made to the Attorney General. If no action is taken within a year, then a private lawyer may act. Because what I've seen in my practice is these federal laws with no private right of action have gone under-enforced for 25 years, which has led to the rise of this essentially unregulated exploitative industry in schools. And so with that, thank you for inviting me to speak today, and I'd love to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Andrew. Michael?
Andrew, so I've been told about illegal activity happening in schools on issued devices. Can you speak on that?
I can. So if you think about the worst possible things that can happen to a kid on the internet, those things are happening to a kid on the internet at school. Because the platforms they use by and large are Google Chromebooks, and by and large they're open portals to the internet. Google has admitted as much in filings and arguments in my own lawsuits. And so let's get specific though. The types of things that we're talking about are unwanted contact from adults to children. And if you're aware of the Roblox lawsuits that are currently happening, there is a pattern, and there is, as crazy as it sounds, there is a network of people who try to exploit children and share tips online for how to do it. And so they go to these unregulated platforms, or platforms that people think are safe, that have a communication function like Roblox. And this is a client of mine. This happened to as well. Go on Roblox, whether that's at the school, so the kids on Roblox, school thinks it's safe, parents think it's safe, they think it's educational. There's this communication function. Someone, an adult predator goes on there and starts befriending a student user and pretending they're another kid, whatever it is. And they say, hey, now that we're friends, let's go over to Discord or Telegram. These are other communications applications that are end-to-end encrypted, and they don't maintain logs. And so there's no evidence of the criminal activity. And there they begin, engaging these children in this manipulative relationship, eventually encouraging them to, share naked pictures of themselves, try and meet up in person. And so these things have happened. My clients so far, fortunately, have been near misses, but we know from these Roblox lawsuits that other kids haven't been so fortunate. And the danger with these school-issued devices is we're all kind of habituated to think that if it comes from school, it's safe. If it comes from school, somebody's got to be looking out for this, because that's how everything else in school is, right? It's like we have, textbooks, like I said, that take a long time to get the content within them approved. We've got, standards for the type of paint you can use. It can't be toxic lead paint anymore. You can't put asbestos into schools. The physical, devices and products that are in school, there's been more than a century of consumer product regulation around, what a safe school bus looks like, what a safe desk looks like for the age of the kid, what safe playground equipment looks like. Well, there's none of that when it comes to what a safe computer for a young student is. And so we're all sort of living in this false sense of security that at least somebody's got their hand on the tiller. Well, they don't. And so essentially what we're doing, what we have to assume, is that when you give a kid a computer at school, you're giving them access to the open internet, and you're giving the internet open access to them. Through my work, I've been in contact with the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, which is a task force of U.S. law enforcement that is devoted to preventing and solving internet crimes against children. And another unfortunate aspect of this is that since COVID, online crimes against kids have skyrocketed, but we don't have the evidence that we need, or the rigorous study of we talk about internet crimes, but at the end of the internet there is a computer, and in front of the computer there is a kid. And what we don't have is, where did that computer come from? Is that a device that the parents bought for the kid and gave to them? Is it something that the child obtained themselves? Or is it something that the school gave to them? We just don't have that information yet. I've been encouraging anyone who will listen that this is an area worthy of study. We don't have that, but we do know that the internet is not safe for kids. It's not designed to be, and there are people who are intentionally out there trying to exploit children, and they can succeed. And it doesn't have to happen. It doesn't have to be this way.
And how would you address people that would say that why we should not blame students if they come across harmful content?
I think students aren't to blame at all. These things are being thrust in their faces. I think let's take a big step back. These aren't kids that are sneaking out of school and walking down the street to go to the sex shop, for example. These are kids who are, in the library and go to the kids section of the library and open a book that they think has to do with, something that they're interested in, and they open it up, and all of a sudden it's full of violence and pornography, right? Because they are not in control of the algorithm. The algorithm feeds information to children. And so when you've got clients like mine, who, for example, are curious about, an animated character that they like, and then it leads to, so they do a Google search, and then they continue to search, and then that leads to, pornography involving that character, and then that leads to pornography involving, real adults. This happens, and this isn't the kid's fault, and it's also not a problem for kids to be, curious about their body. And about their changing lives and social dynamics. In a physical library that is curated by professional librarians, you're not going to run across Hustler magazine, which isn't to say that there's not a place for Hustler magazine in our society. It's just, I think we can all agree it's not in a library of an elementary school. And so kids are really at the mercy of these opaque search algorithms and content surfacing algorithms. They really have no control over. And we also think about the school environment being one where you have to go, and it is a controlled environment. You don't get free reign. You have to be there, and you have to kind of stay on task and do what you want to do, or to do what you're supposed to do in order to get an education. That's what we've societally decided is good for kids. And so a computer can't be just like a way to get out of school, because the point is you're supposed to be there for your own benefit and really for all of our benefit.
Other questions for Andrew? Andrew, thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Patricia.
Yes, good morning, members of
Morning.
the committee. My name is Patricia Agner, and I serve as a technology director at the Rutland City Public Schools in Vermont. I'm also a Vermont parent of a child who has attended school here, and this is my 31st year in education. In that time, I've worked as a middle school teacher, a kindergarten through 5 tech coach, and a technology director. I'm licensed as a kindergarten through 6 teacher, middle school teacher, principal, and superintendent in Vermont. And I appreciate the opportunity to discuss H650, I want to thank you for considering how we can best protect students from a consumer safety perspective. It's essential work, and I appreciate the facts that all the experts have brought to bear on this topic. I do want to share a bit about our software implementation process, which is very similar to the information Jeff Wallace shared with you. It's really nice to see consistency across state systems, and it's not uncommon for technology directors to adopt the same practices as a result of our collaborative work on student data privacy through the AOE, COSN, and VitalLearn, our ISTE ASCD affiliate. So how do we select software? In our district, the vetting process starts with the experts closest to the students, our teachers, department heads, and curriculum specialists. We choose software based on specific academic goals. In our schools, decisions are made by professional, licensed staff based on content expertise. So what does this intake process look like? Who and how? I want to take you through a typical software implementation cycle. We have established clear entry points for our new technology requests. So who can initiate a request? Well, a classroom teacher, a curriculum specialist focused on math, ELA, science, or another subject, departments such as world language or technology, CTE teachers or directors requesting technical reviews for industry tools, school administrators or principals, and district leadership, including assistant superintendents or special ed directors. How does the process start? Well, sometimes staff emails the tech director directly and asks for guidelines. Sometimes they submit a help desk ticket regarding the process. Then we ask them to complete a formal request form to document the age of the students, the purpose of the software, and much more. Once the request is made, we connect with our principals and assistant superintendent so that they can guide the process from an educational perspective, determine if there's a need for the software, if the software is critical and not redundant, and decide if we should pursue a data privacy agreement. Sometimes the agreement already exists for Vermont, and sometimes they don't. If they do, we leverage the work completed by other school systems by adding their agreement to our portal. And our process is very much like the process Jeff Wallace explained on February the 6th, and it covers many of the areas found in the bill. So I want to share with you too that it's a collaborative process. So once a request is made, it follows a specific multi-layered flow chart to ensure curricular and environmental fit, data privacy, account management, budgetary and funding considerations. We purchase very little new software as a district. If a software solution is not a good fit, we actively consider replacing it, but in general, very little new software is purchased at the district level. In fact, we've spent the post-COVID era weeding out vast amounts of free, duplicative software offered by vendors. After all, nothing is truly free. And that's why we have a vetting process. So what might it look like in that collaborative workflow? Well, at the teacher level, the teacher might make the request, the department reviews it, then the principal, then the assistant superintendent. Then it comes to technology, and we do our technical review and data process agreement creation. At the school departmental level, it might look like a school department. Then it goes to the principal, the assistant superintendent, and then technology department review and data processing agreement creation. At the curriculum level, it might be content specialists or coaches, and then it goes to a committee, like a content committee, and it might be a year-long study. Then it goes to the assistant superintendent and on to technology and a DPA creation. It can come from the principal to the assistant superintendent with that same workflow, or from the assistant superintendent to technology. Something else to consider is that in schools in general across Vermont, our safety nets are more robust than ever. So in talking to IT directors around the state, the majority of us leverage that legal protection, the Student Data Privacy Consortium, which again, Jeff discussed in detail, so I won't. And we signed those national data privacy agreements that were edited for Vermont. This includes things like district ownership of data, the right to audit vendors, and much more. These are renewed and reviewed regularly with beginning and end dates in the portal. We actively monitor in schools School districts around Vermont use tools like GoGuardian Teacher or Hapara for instructional management to provide teachers with data on how technology is being used, allowing them to manage screen time in real time. Teachers can see if students are on task or if they're in the wrong place and correct it without singling students out and embarrassing them. They can also consider engagement data and time spent online across these software products and other software tools. School districts in Vermont use single sign-on for security, and they use products like Clever or ClassLink for a software launchpad and single sign-on, and some products collect engagement usage and other data. And then we filter in schools. So schools use products like GoGuardian and Securely, and these allow schools to filter on the go in addition to firewalls on premise. We do face challenges when students try to circumvent filters to access games and block content, and sometimes blocking also impacts educationally viable information. Then there are common standards of practice within districts, like as a district, if a teacher requests free software that will not sign a data privacy agreements through the Student Data Privacy Consortium, we block the software. We block all games and a wide variety of websites. We block websites that display advertising, even those that comply with the COPA Safe Harbor services. YouTube is blocked for student search on our education domain through Google, and teachers must create links to resources and vet them first. When we consider school technology, we have a wide variety of adopted software suited to different purposes. So as children get older, the software becomes more specialized. We may purchase music composition software, science software, biology, chemistry, statistics software, design and CAD software, world language software, and much more as we move from middle to high school. Some of the software we purchase includes library software, the student information system, special ed software, assessment software, the Google Education domain, reading and writing support software, parent engagement software, video design software, robotics software, school lunch software, and content area software mentioned earlier. There are some broadly adopted software programs that curriculum specialists review, then content committees, and then the assistant superintendent, which are gamified and geared towards learning and practice in math and literacy. If gamified learning software is not approved with a data privacy agreement and we see it, we block it. Students tend not to ask for time in gamified content software. They're doing additional practice in an area where they may already be struggling. So even if it's gamified, they aren't consistently engaged because they still have to do math and literacy work. Just because something is gamified doesn't mean that they want to do the job. And it's worth mentioning that students will ask about working with robots, laser cutters, and 3D printing. Many students like hands-on activities like this, as well as engineering and STEAM. So what does technology look like in schools? In our schools, we believe in a developmentally appropriate philosophy, prioritizing human connection and scaling tech usage for maturity as students prepare for college and careers. I personally don't believe that kindergarten students should use computers regularly. This is me as a parent, as an educator. The work of kindergarten is to understand what it means to be a student and a citizen of a school, how to be a good friend and a classmate, and what it means to be an active learner. Computers are sometimes used in kindergarten, but it is not required except on occasion for assessment, such as phonological awareness or number sense, which is guided one-on-one with a teacher. In fact, I expressed to K2 principals that I don't support technology in kindergarten, and I think many educators sighed with relief. As you can imagine, if a student can't read their letters or numbers, they can't log on to a Chromebook very easily. So students in 9 through 12, however, have some heavy lifting to do to prepare for workforce or college. If you look at the Future of Jobs Report 2025 by the World Economic Forum, you'll see how technology is trending. For example, teaching about AI will be essential as the workforce expects fluent users. Today's college students take courses online and in person. I know that because I have a student in college, and there's heavy reliance on technology and instruction and assessment. There are no snow days in schools like colleges. CTE and other employment tracks require the use of Microsoft Suite, specialized medical software, engineering software, auto repair software, you name it. If you look at how agriculture has changed in Vermont, you will see how even businesses like syrup production are beginning to rely on data analytics, AI, and smart monitoring systems, leak detection and alerting, and much more. The landscape is shifting. So what I hope you'll consider as you work towards making educational technology consumer safe. State and national assessments partially drive the need for technology understanding and usage. Students need to be able to navigate the software, use a mouse, access tools, type, and more by 3rd grade so that they can take the VTCAP, then later on the NAEP maybe, or perhaps the WIDA testing. This is how you measure if our schools are providing a good or a bad education. If students cannot read online, type, navigate, or perform other basic functions, they will not be able to complete the required tests. Me, I'd be happy to get back to paper and pencil testing in K4, but I don't know if vendors are offering Scantron on a national test. National testing has changed, and it's changed our school reality. Technology is a global reality. If you look at the ISTE standards for students, teachers, and leaders, you can better understand the work we need to do in K-12 and why technology is essential for children and young adults. The student standards covered by digital citizenship, being an empowered learner, a knowledge constructor, innovative designer and computational thinker, creative communicator, and also a global collaborator. This is the best kind of work enabled by technology. I also have a wondering about centralization and how it might be tricky for schools with the volume of software mentioned by Jeff and a deadline of June of 2027. I'm glad that you've made some changes. So ongoing software implementation could be complex for some areas. I'm thinking about perhaps some programs like at CTE. For example, in health science, students might rely on industry standard software for the LNA role and for testing. If a state acts as a sole gatekeeper for these niche tools, we could be trapped in state-level bottlenecks for months. This could effectively prevent students from meeting the certification or graduation requirements necessary to enter the workforce. And I do not think these companies would pay for researchers to vet their tools for 9 through 12 necessarily. If that's the case, then who would do the work in this model? I don't know that the vendor would pay for it, and would these tools be exempt? So what could this process look like? Well, I'm wondering about the AOE and other state agencies having the capacity to be nimble and responsive to schools and the needs of K-12 and CTE. We do use hundreds of products. Would we need to stop using them? What would happen in that instance? Textbooks aren't readily available like they were 20 years ago when I was teaching, and sometimes a teacher needs something quickly. We've been very effective at doing this through the Student Data Privacy Consortium because they have lawyers and staffing to assist us. I also wonder if this could cause issues with educational purpose and review process. The AOE and other state agencies lack the content area expertise to select software for such diverse needs. We could end up with the wrong software because the vetting and selection process doesn't align with the educational need. The methods we use in school districts support reasonable decision-making authority and educator initiative, as well as departmental and cross-functional or grade-level collaboration. We can offer more value to students and the classroom teacher by working with schools rather than just state-level vetting, streamlining internal processes, engaging our content experts, implementing internal review processes, and establishing post-implementation software review processes and feedback loops on effectiveness and engagement, and much more. So what if we could change how all schools review software using something like a district-based standardized education software lifecycle? Well, to streamline digital tool management, the AOE could develop some comprehensive guidelines covering the entire software lifecycle. This initiative could be spearheaded by a multi-district committee of schools and integrated into the school consolidation process to ensure statewide consistency. The AOE and schools could develop comprehensive guidelines covering vetting, procurement, and recurring audits. This model empowers local content experts, ensures legal protections through existing alliances like TEC and SDPC, and maintains the nimbleness required for Vermont students to thrive. Some key components of a process life cycle like this could be pre-acquisition vetting, formalizing criteria for privacy, security, compliance, and pedagogical value, perhaps updating the Vermont State Data Privacy Agreement to ensure alignment with consumer privacy concerns through the SDPC. That would be a logical, leverageable, and a win for all. Procurement and implementation, establish standard protocols for onboarding new software, and then a post-implementation review. Define a recurring process for auditing usage, cost, and educational impact to determine if we will renew a software or retire it.
I was asking about lunch.
The last thing I would like to share is that I heard some concerns about addictiveness and digital wellness. And because we review parents as partners, we could consider how we engage families as part of this broader initiative in conjunction with the AOE. We could use the Student Data Privacy Resource Registry as a transparency portal. And that could show every approved app and its curricular purpose. We could post it on school websites or on the AOE website. We could consider how we support parents with parental controls. Some software allow parental controls and monitoring of Chromebooks outside of school hours. That might be something we consider exploring on a statewide basis. And talking with other directors, some districts are already implementing this. Looking at reporting, we could work towards standards and monitoring usage of technology by students using some of the products we have in place, so that we can ensure that students are not experiencing digital or screen fatigue in grade bands. This could be part of the AOE's guidelines on screen time and students in K through 12. Some of the data we could work towards in schools include teacher engagement tracking of software to look at whether students are fatigued, post-implementation reviews of usage metrics showing how long students in specific grade bands use tools, efficiency audits to identify subpar software that is underutilized or ineffective, and the long-term impact of software on educational value, seeing that students are actually growing from usage versus just having no impact. Another thing we might consider is digital wellness webinar series. It would be amazing if the state supported a district-based or regional series to help parents understand and manage technology use. This series would help parents mirror the boundaries we work to set at schools, such as grade-appropriate screen time, age-based software requirements. I know from students that some parents allow social media use for young children, for example, and working with school districts as a partner in the child's overall well-being as part of our Portrait of a Graduate and strategic plan implementation. So what I'd like to leave you with today is that I appreciate the updates to H650, the AOE's role, school engagement, and study criteria. Schools want to be nimble, innovative, and safe. Let's leverage the robust systems we already have to improve student safety, such as the Student Data Privacy Consortium, without freezing innovation in Vermont classrooms. We could add to this conversation by working collaboratively with parents in the AOE on student health and wellness to address concerns about digital fatigue and monitoring, and to develop guidelines for a standardized education software lifecycle for schools, harnessing schools' expertise and the state's guidance as partners in regulation. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. Any questions? Thank you. Renee?
Good morning. Thank you for
Good morning.
providing me the opportunity to be here today. My name is Renee Bedeau, and I serve as the Director of Curriculum, Instruction, and Assessment for Central Vermont Supervisory Union. Our supervisory union includes 6 schools serving the towns of Washington, Orange, Williamstown, and Northfield. This is my 4th year in the role, my 11th year in public education as an administrator, and my 21st year in public education. I'm here today to provide you information on how our district currently vets educational applications for instructional use and to provide context for how those tools are implemented within our schools. I'll begin with the security and privacy of student information. Whenever we consider adopting a new educational application, it is first reviewed by our technology department to ensure full compliance with all applicable laws and supervisory union policies governing the collection, storage, and disclosure of student data and other confidential information. All district applications are entered into Clever, which is a secure single sign-on portal. Any application that does not meet these requirements is eliminated from consideration. Protecting student privacy is non-negotiable. It is foundational to our decision-making process. In addition to security and privacy protections, we carefully evaluate each application for educational value and alignment. The district applications currently in use have been implemented for several years. All are aligned with our coordinated curriculum and are used strictly as supplemental supports to core education. These applications serve varied instructional purposes. Some provide additional practice for students who need reinforcement of prior grade level skills. Others offer enrichment opportunities for students ready to extend beyond grade level standards. Additional applications support current grade level instruction through extended practice or assist students with individualized special education needs. Importantly, none of these tools replace core instruction delivered by certified teachers, nor are they used for prolonged unsupervised instructional periods. Teachers have access to Securely, which allows them to monitor all student activity on all student devices on their computer all at once. When we do consider adopting a new application, the process is deliberate and evidence-based. After passing security and privacy review, we examine research to determine educational soundness. We consult established, reputable sources, such as Evidence for ESSA, ERIC at the Institute of Education Sciences, the Best Evidence Encyclopedia, and the National Center on Intensive Intervention. If the application demonstrates strong research support, we proceed with a structured pilot. A group of teachers implements the program, and we analyze data both from our local common assessments in conjunction with classroom performance data to determine whether student outcomes improve. Only if the data demonstrates measurable benefit do we move to the supervisory union-wide access. Prior to broader implementation, teachers receive formal training followed by ongoing virtual and in-person professional development as programs evolve to ensure fidelity and effective use. Our supervisory union recognizes the value of educational applications as supplemental tools that can personalize learning and provide targeted practice. However, we are equally clear that technology is never a substitute for high-quality instruction delivered by our certified educators. These tools are designed to enhance and support classroom teaching and not replace it. Thank you for the opportunity to share our process, and I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Thanks, Renee. Dee?
Thanks, Renee. I appreciate you being here. I'm curious about when when a platform, when software is being chosen versus when books are being chosen. When a teacher wants to add a book or some kind of support in the classroom that is not technology, do they have ways to check and see if that is appropriate for their age group, for whatever they're trying to learn? Are there outside systems that help them understand how that can fit? I don't know if I asked that question really well. We're consumer protection, we're not education, so I'm not really. Yeah.
I think that's when you're thinking K-12, that's a really broad question. I think that if there is a kindergarten teacher that wants to add a book to her read aloud, no, it's not necessarily vetted through anyone. And as far as looking at the bigger curricular piece of, what books are being taught in 6th grade, that's a collaborative process that the teachers do together. And we periodically will get them together every couple of years to review and discuss, are these the books that we're going to continue? Are there new ones that we want to bring in? What is the purpose? What is the focus? And so at the district-wide level, as far as the bigger picture, there are those discussions. At the individual classroom level, like I said, for example, if a kindergarten teacher is reading an individual book one day for read aloud, no, every single book is not vetted.
And curricula, like a math curriculum or something like that, there are places to review where they are effective, right? Where a math curriculum is effective.
Yes, absolutely. So for example, we do have a K-8 math curriculum. And that is something that our common local assessment also aligns with that. And so we have a pacing guide that shows all of our principals and teachers where they should be throughout the year. And so that they know where, that they're ensuring that they're teaching all the grade level material, and that the principals can help support if there's anywhere where they're getting off track. And in regard to this bill specifically, one concern that I do have is that there is an online portion of our math program that is adaptive to each individual student based on the assessment that they take 3 times a year. So when they take the assessment, it identifies areas of need that the student has, gaps that they need filled, and it gives them individualized support to get those gaps filled. And one concern that I would have is, we're making contracts now with companies for next year that because as you're aware, school districts across the state have different programs, if some of these programs are not approved or the online portion is not approved, then our teachers would be left without those resources, and our students in a time where we're focusing more than ever on improved student outcomes, that they could actually potentially lose those supports. Then we would have to shift gears and try to figure out ways to fill those gaps that would be lost without.
I guess, my question is more around what we're trying to do is set up a place where schools could have an easier way to vet whether the software was both safe for kids and effective in use. And I'm trying to understand if you have those places where you can look at a math curriculum or a reading curriculum or other curriculum. Are there other places that those are vetted outside of your individual school?
As you mean as far as their educational effectiveness?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. So some of the places that I listed, and there are also places that the AOE recommends. Let me just find it here. So the evidence for ESSA, ERIC at the Institute of Education Science, the Best Evidence Encyclopedia, National Center on Intensive Intervention. They vet educationally a lot of resources so that we can go in and see if they're products that we should pursue.
Thank you.
Other questions for Renee? Great. Renee, thank you for taking time to talk with us this morning. We appreciate it. So why don't we work through our break? So why don't we take 5 minutes? 5 minutes, 5 minutes. That doesn't have 15 minutes. And be back here at 25 so we can continue our discussions on CTE.